When speaking of events that happen at the same time, it is a little easy to get confused unless you handle them one at a time. In today's video, we will back up to November 14th, 1863, and go forward in time, following the orders and actions of Major General Burnside, Brigadier General Orlando B. Willcox, Major Charles H. Beers, and General Grant. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Backing up to go forward. Once again, we need to back up a few weeks to November 14th, 1863, and go forward in time to understand all of the events that is about to take place. We have already discussed the events surrounding the running battles to Knoxville, the battle for Campbell Station, and the battle for Fort Sanders. But there are other battles and events taking place that would lead to the total defeat of Longstreet for his bid to retake both Knoxville, Tennessee, and the control over East Tennessee once more. So we are backing up to the date that Longstreet crossed the north bank of the Tennessee River near Loudon. Major General Ambrose Burnside telegraphed Union Brigadier General Orlando B. Willcox with the orders to hold Bull's Gap and Greenville, Tennessee. Burnside ordered Willcox to send the Hoskins Brigade to Knoxville. Willcox had under his command after this point the 4 Indiana Infantry Regiments, 3 batteries, the 32nd Kentucky Infantry Regiment, the 11th Michigan Battery, a small North Carolina unit, and 2 battalions of the East Tennessee recruits. In addition, Willcox directed a Union Cavalry Division under Colonel John W. Foster, consisting of 2 cavalry brigades led by Colonels Israel Garrett and Felix W. Graham, protecting the Cumberland Gap. For his final orders before the telegraph line was cut, Burnside stated that if a retreat was necessary, then Willcox was to withdraw his men to the Cumberland Gap to protect the telegraph lines between Burnside and Fort Nelson in Kentucky. On November 19th, General Willcox began his retreat to Bend Station. On November 20th, Willcox and his troops reached Cumberland Gap. But the situation was dire at this posting. There was barely enough food to feed a garrison, and there were 6,000 troops to worry about. The heavy Appalachian autumn rains made it impossible for wagons sent from Fort Nelson to reach the area because of swollen rivers and muddy conditions. To keep his men from starvation, General Willcox split his men into 2 groups. The first group he sent out to find food. They went as far as Lee County, Virginia in their searches, and they were able to recapture a herd of hogs near Jacksboro. The second group of men were sent to Tazewell to observe what Lieutenant Longstreet and his men were doing. And during this time, there were hundreds of pro-Union refugees that were fleeing from Knoxville and going through the Cumberland Gap to escape to Kentucky. Due to miscommunication, General Grant was not aware that Willcox was under the direct orders of Major General Burnside. Grant severely criticized Willcox for the actions of retreating to Cumberland Gap instead of keeping his post or retreating to Knoxville. Grant did not issue any explicit orders for Willcox to take his men to Knoxville. However, he did make it quite clear that is what he wanted Willcox to do. So now, we have a bit of back and forth going on between Burnside and Willcox. This section will be read from the Battle of Walker's Ford Wikipedia page. Quote, Burnside sent a message to the siege lines asking the cavalry be sent south of the Clinch River. Hearing by telegraph from Grant that the Battle of Missionary Ridge had commenced, Willcox passed this information through the siege lines to Burnside via a secret messenger. Knowing that Grant's forces were finally in motion, Willcox determined to carry out Burnside's instructions. Unquote. Major General Ambrose Burnside had requested to be relieved of his command. However, Major General John G. Foster, who was to replace Burnside, did not reach the Cumberland Gap until November 30th. The skirmish at Jonesville, Virginia. Under the orders of Willcox, Union Major Charles H. Beers and his 250 men in the 16th Illinois Cavalry Regiment left Cumberland Gap and rode northeast to Jonesville, Virginia. There, they surprised attacked Colonel Campbell Slimp's 64th Virginia Mounted Infantry Regiment. Major Beers would report that there were 20 Confederates killed and 26 captured during the battle. Beers and his men would remain in Jonesville for another month. They would be defeated in battle when the Confederate General William Edmondson Grumble Jones attacked Beers on January 2nd and 3rd of 1864. The Maynardville Skirmish. Willcox ordered Colonel Felix William Graham to Tazewell on November 27, 1863, from Knoxville. At the same time, Willcox ordered Colonel Israel Garrett's brigade to hold Bean Station. Graham followed the Straight Creek Road to cross the Clinch River at Walker's Ford to reach Maynardville on November 29th. Graham would have under his command a total of 1,088 men. Of those, 57 men were officers and 1,031 were enlisted men. He also had the command of 4 artillery guns of Colvin's Illinois Battery and 2 rifled guns of the 5th Indiana Cavalry Regiment. On November 30th, Graham had advanced a further 15 miles or 24 kilometers south and pulled his troops back to Maynardsville. Graham would skirmish against the troops of Confederate General William Edmondson Grumble Jones. During that time, Major General John G. Foster finally crossed the Cumberland Gap and reached Knoxville to relieve Major General Ambrose Burnside of duty by his own request. Foster approved of Willcox's plan to engage the Confederate troops. Lieutenant General Longstreet received word that Jones had engaged Graham in a skirmish. Longstreet ordered Brigadier General Frank Crawford Armstrong to cross the north bank to oppose Graham. Armstrong took 2 brigades from the Cherokee Heights with him. Their commanders were Colonel George Gibbs DeBrille and Colonel Thomas Harrison. According to the Share Tennessee government webpage, Colonel Felix W. Graham wrote 2 reports concerning the skirmish. The first report reads as the following. Quote, December 1st, 1863, skirmish at Maynardsville. Reports of Colonel Felix W. Graham, 5th Indiana Cavalry, commanding 2nd Brigade. Maynardville, December 1st, 1863, 11:30 a.m. A party which I sent on Knoxville Road has come up with rebels about 3 miles out. They are skirmishing now. A scout which I sent towards Blaine's Crossroads reports half a regiment at the crossroads, and a party of about 100, 4 miles this side. My scout is within a mile of the latter. A citizen, just then, reports the enemy as having evacuated Knoxville and retreating in direction of Morristown. A rebel woman of this place, who left here a few days ago for the purpose of visiting her husband in the rebel service, returned last night and says she did not see her husband, as Longstreet had been ordered to fall back to Georgia, and is gone, and that none but cavalry remained around Knoxville. F. W. Graham, Colonel, Commanding Brigade. Unquote. While the report from the lady was inaccurate, Longstreet would vacate Knoxville and take up residence for the winter months in Russellville, Tennessee. But there was still some fighting left before this would happen. The next report, according to the Share Tennessee Gov website, took place later that same day. Quote, Maynardsville, December 1st, 1863. Sir, Skirmishing had been kept up all day on the main Knoxville road, about 4 miles from town, without any detriment to either side. The enemy had position on the mountains, and kept it. Our scouts went out on the road of Blaine's Crossroads, came up with the enemy about 8 miles out, skirmished with them nearly all day without any loss on our side. Late this evening, Carter was reported within 4 miles of town. I have decided on holding this place until the enemy's intentions are fully known. Firing commenced at Knoxville about 3 o'clock this afternoon and still continues. F. W. Graham, Colonel, Commanding Brigade." Unquote. Graham sensed that the forces that he was facing increased in size, so at midnight he abandoned Maynardville, leaving behind Company M, 5th Indiana Cavalry as a picket. Graham took his remaining forces northeast. The march continued until 5 a.m. on December 2nd at the location of Brock's house, which is 4 miles or 6.4 kilometers south of Walker's Ford, in a wide gap in Lone Mountain. Willcox arrived at Tazewell with his infantry late on December 1st and received Graham's latest situation report. In next week's video, we will continue with the Maynardville Skirmishes, which will lead us into the battle for Walker's Ford. Thank you. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Civil War battles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky, Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.